Hey, everybody. We're back for another episode of the Ship Show series. Today's Thursday, May 4th, 2023. It's episode number 15 on our yearly series. And Jason and I are back today to talk about the FMR, the Freight Market Roundup. So, Jason, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
How are
It's
you?
I'm good. I've got to be honest. We're I'm in Michigan, right? So the weather happens every day. You never know what you're going to get. And and also I've got this lawn that I'm trying to like modify, and so we've had these random like freezing events that were not expected. But no, I mean, sun is shining, wonderful day. Um I hate to say it, but I wish we were at the end of 2023 just so this freight market could figure itself out. But here we are. Let's work together to get through this.
Yeah. Jason, why don't you take us in for a deep dive and tell us what you got going on there today?
Well, I'd love to. So, this is our FMR show. So, how our FMR works, and let me just kind of frame set because we've got a lot of reoccurring guests that come, but we've also got new people that come every week. So, we like to keep kind of a regular format because we don't go through visual aids. So, how this works is what we're going to do is we're first going to run through each of our major trade lanes. We're going to start with the Trans-Pacific. Then we're going to move over to our transatlantic. And then finally, we're going to touch on our Suez Canal lanes. So our China to Europe trade lane on the opposite side of the world. Now, the goal here is between each section, I'm going to touch on some of the current events that our teams are thinking about, but also that our customers have alerted us that they're concerned about or worried about or looking for our advice on. And, when we're done wrapping up with the ocean market and the ocean current events, we're going to turn our frame of reference over to the air freight market. We're going to talk about what rates we've been seeing lately, and then we're going to move into the oil and gas market as well. So a lot of ground to cover, and sometimes we add things in, sometimes we subtract things out. Really depends on what the attention's on right then. But let's get going. So, like I said, Trans-Pacific lane, and remember, when we're talking about the Trans-Pacific lanes, we are looking at only our ocean rate averages. And it's really the ocean rate averages our team saw, not this week, but it's last week. So over the course of the week. And then, sometimes we've got a lower shipment volume. Sometimes we've got a higher shipment volume. This could skew our average in either direction. So if you're shipping with us and it feels higher or it feels lower, it's just because of the volume that week. Now, thing we have to mention is there's been a lot of action, obviously, in the ocean shipping market. And by a lot of action, I mean a lot of lack of demand. So a lot of things that we don't like to see. Firstly, we had a GRI that was pushed through last month, and GRI is also known as a general rate increase. And, even though there was a lack of demand, it sort of stuck. So rates spiked in the last weeks of April, and we saw our averages go from just around 1,000 a TEU, which is, complete floor for rates when you're talking about importing. And so, for example, Trans-Pacific, we're talking about importing from Southeast Asia, China, into the U.S. West Coast. So we were sitting right there at 1,000 a TEU, just crazy low. And around the last couple of weeks of April, it spiked all the way up to 1,725 a TEU. Now, since that GRI was implemented, we're already seeing rates kind of trickle back downwards relatively slowly. We're sitting right now, as of last week, the numbers were at around 1,690. And the ocean shipping lines have actually already announced another GRI they're going to push through. And, Anthony and I have talked extensively about this. Inside of our company, we've also talked extensively about this. What's going on here is, yes, there's a lack of demand. The ocean liners have been pulling every lever they really can to, control these rates and create a structure for these rates. Generally, how they do that is they remove capacity, so blank sailings. Now they're pushing these GRIs through because it has been contract season. It is contract season. And they're having a tough time locking in contracts that make sense for them, given the incredibly low spot market. Now, this has been a really incredible year so far. It's been busy. And when I say incredible, I'm talking about the standpoint from leaving the pandemic era kind of work from home environment. Now we're out and about, we're at networking events. It has been a really crazy event season, and it's been really interesting. I've really enjoyed it. I think just getting together with the shippers, with the carriers and everyone having them in the same room and going to these panel discussions and hearing people's honest opinions about problems has been fantastic. And what I have been hearing from some of the largest shippers that we work with or we do small projects with, and also other shippers we don't do anything for at these events, is what they're doing right now is they've been able to lock in kind of like a flexible contract, and they're leaning on the spot market currently very heavily because it's just so low, but they've got contracts in place that are higher that they're expected to kind of switch to near the end of the year. So it is a weird time period. That idea really didn't have legs prior to the pandemic, but when the ocean shipping vessel operators just decided to basically tear up contracts during the pandemic, and space that was committed to individuals just wasn't available anymore. This idea of what is a contract even worth has really been floating around the air right now. And also, obviously with the spot market rates just so low, unsustainably low for contract levels, again, a lot of shippers are they're addressing this question of why sign a contract if it's just going to cost me more. So it's a weird moment, but also an interesting moment for opportunity for people that are importing and really optimistic about the end of the year or even sooner. Anthony, I'm sucking up the air. Do you want to mention anything before I dive into a couple things going on in the world?
No, this is great. Just one thing I will say that, as the annual ocean carrier contracts negotiations, as you mentioned, slowly continue, I think it appears that the floating rate levels, as you mentioned, have likely reached their bottom levels. And, this was after the retreat from the record-setting cost and the premium surcharges that we experienced since late 2021 and most of 2022, while the space was in high demand and the volume surged to record-breaking levels. So I think, as we saw back on April 15th and then on May 1st, the majority of the carriers started to try to do that, started that implementation of that general rate increase. And, as Jason said, many carriers are announcing more, but I think what's really going to even compound the whole situation more is the rising fuel costs. So the bunker surcharges, which are the bunker barges, which are the diesel barges that put low sulfur fuel and diesel fuel on the vessels, they're expected to increase as that becomes more volatile, that market, with the cost of energy and fuel rising. So I think it's only going to contribute even more to rate increases in the coming months over the summer. And, many of the bunker adjustment factors are already confirmed. So I think Jason's, right on point as usual with everything. I mean, with the uncertainty of the U.S. economy and the continued high inventory levels, which are just two factors that are making forecasting difficult. When we think about the contract negotiations, the carriers are resorting, as Jason said, to those tactics that, they want to improve upon, such as the void sailings and the port emissions and the slow steaming to increase vessel utilization and create space demand. So we're really in a real interesting time right now. But Jason, go ahead. Why don't you continue to deep dive?
Hey, I got to tell you, no, you covered a lot of really awesome areas, and you made a lot of really great points too. We are seeing kind of a divergence between the fuel in the ocean shipping market and the ground market, and the main reason why is we've got all of these new carbon initiatives coming through, and that is affecting some of your costs right now. And also, it's just a different type. It's a different type. There's a different requirements as well, a different level of processing too. The couple things I want to talk about are oh gosh, but Anthony, you made me want to talk about something else as well. So we were with Marine Worldwide just yesterday, and they were giving a panel discussion about Vietnam and using Vietnam as a supplier. They've got a plant in China. They also have a plant in Vietnam, and it's really interesting. They were talking about just this idea of stock all throughout the network right now, and actually the manufacturers having availability. So if you would have gone to Vietnam back in 2018 looking to diversify your supply chain and start up a manufacturing operation, they probably would have laughed at you because there was literally no room. We've got our executives make trips out to China, Vietnam, and the like. at least yearly, if not multiple times a year, to meet with our partner agents to just ensure, our systems are lined up and that we have good processes to make sure we can, execute shipments in a way that is, of the utmost importance to the customer having to be involved only when necessary. But their trip to Vietnam was eye-opening. It's always been eye-opening because it's just bustling with activity. That being said, you wouldn't have been able to get into Vietnam back in 2018, but right now, you could. And that's just because there's so much inventory in the system at the moment. There's availability for these manufacturers to take on new projects, which is nuts. But a couple things we got to talk about. West Shore contract negotiations. It's been going on. We're coming up on the year anniversary. It was not supposed to be this way. They didn't file an extension. They are operating in a way that is scary for every shipper out there, and they've been doing it for such a long time. But I am happy to say that just yesterday, they got over what is considered the largest hurdle in these negotiations. And this involved the non-automated terminals and how the manning requirements would work. They basically announced, now remember, they're pretty good at a media blackout with these negotiations, but they let it slip that they came to a tentative agreement on the non-automated terminals and the manning requirements, and they're moving on to negotiate wages and pension benefits. Now, it might feel like, out of the pot and into the fire with that kind of line, especially given with all the union negotiations we've seen and how many times they've stubbed their toe, specifically on wages, pension benefits. Think of the rail negotiations, sick days. But a lot of experts who have watched this year over year, they were involved in the the last contract negotiations, making predictions and kind of doing a post-mortem on that. They are pointing to a contract that just was signed in the beginning of April, and this was a version of the ILWU that was out in Hawaii, and they actually reached their tentative agreement that included a 10% wage increase, and that worked. So they're saying, hey, this was the hard part. We are done with that. They're expecting this to be finalized the next couple of weeks. So we're going to hold them to that. I'm really excited to see if this will be finalized. But it's one of many contract negotiations that we are going to be seeing on the horizon this year, just in the US, that is not including abroad. And I am only going to talk about a few of them because there's literally so many happening at this moment. So one we mentioned a little while ago that has been pretty quiet is this ILWU Canada. And it's got, this encompasses 12 locales in Western Canada, also the BCMEA. And they began their formal negotiations back in March 6th, and they immediately just broke down in non-productive negotiations. Let's put it that way. They got the government involved. They cited lack of meaningful progress. They've got officials coming to mediate. I don't know what happened in that room, but it sounds like it was a firestorm. Now, they're currently in a cooling off period. And it quite frankly, there has been no news that is good news, at least on that negotiation. But it's something you got to keep your eyes on. We use Canada ports quite frequently, especially during all of this West Coast drama that's been happening. And we like using the Canada ports. So keep that in mind. This is just starting. It literally started March 6th. Remember, ILWU West Coast. We're coming up on the year anniversary. So this could be a long fight. Next, U.S. trucking market. Now, Anthony, I'm sucking up a lot of air again. Do you want to mention anything?
No. Please, Jason, you're right on point. Enlighten us about the trucking market.
Trucking market, it's in a tough spot. I think we could all agree on that. And the reason why is obviously just the lack of demand. So last week, JB Hunt, the Transportation Services President, Shelley Simpson, basically said, hey, the industry right now, just last week, he said, we're in the middle of a freight recession. And then if you look at what's going on in the port of New York and New Jersey, you have to look in March because just how the data works takes a few weeks into the month to compile the data. So March data, they were down on import numbers by 40%. And, you can look at a local trucking company, Y Logistics. The partner at that company, Eric Hulk, said on Tuesday of this week that basically drivers last year at his company working 5 days a week, every week guaranteed. This year so far, it's a maximum of 3 days a week. So that is another example of these volumes plummeting. And I think it can be a little deceiving because we still have congestion, but the congestion isn't caused by some of the means that you would expect it to be caused by. And also some photos that you'll see of ports that are taken recently where you've got backups of trucks. Again, it is a little bit deceiving. So keep that in mind.
And Jay, just real quick, I know Eric Holt. I know the Holt family. In Philadelphia, they own Holt Marine Terminal, and they also have ownership in Camden Marine Terminal, which is on the Jersey side of the Port of Philadelphia, where I'm based out of. And they're legendary in this port. But I will tell you that the Northeast corridor right now, in terms of the port infrastructure, this is the lowest it's been in 40 years. The volume has been down. I mean, it's just a terrible situation right now. Even with a lot of the shift from cargo from West Coast to East Coast, because of union negotiations and other things that were going on over the last, say, 4 or 5 months, volumes are just terrible.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, and when you were talking about the trucking, just for example, I mean, there's a little bit of congestion, but the majority of the U.S. and the Canadian ports and the rail ramps are fluid, and they're really not experiencing any significant delays. And truck power is available everywhere, but yet we're in the tank here. So back to you, Jay. But
no, I think it's an awesome shift too, because let's set up those transatlantic situation. Let's talk about those rates. And I want to, on the FMR, we are looking at a very long timeline here where we've been watching what's going on. So I always like to remind people like what it used to be, what we just saw, what we're going into, and then we can cumulatively make predictions about what is going to happen based off that. So just to keep people's mind frame reference, kind of aligned, the Europe to North America East Coast lane really has been the shining star of this freight recession. They were the last to get affected. They had the highest rates up to the last moment. Every other freight lane was decreasing. And then we had this Europe to North American East Coast still staying strong at multiples higher in cost than they were prior to the pandemic. But what we've seen over the past couple months is that is changing. And it's not a plummet, but it's been a steady decline in rate. Now, according to some of the trucking companies, they're seeing it as more of a plummet. So some of the rate stability measures that the ocean vessel liners are taking are obviously having an effect at not having that ocean rate just drop off, but it has been a clear downtrend for multiple months. And I'll try to highlight that. So right now, our averages last week were at $3,050, and that is per TEU. And that's down from 3,300 2 weeks ago. Remember that 3050, that's last week. 2 weeks ago, so a week prior, that's down from 3,300. And then if we go all the way back to 8 weeks ago, now that's a little bit longer of a timeline, but remember, this was elevated into December, into January. But if we go back 8 weeks, our rates coming in were around 5,000 per TEU. So it's a very steady decline we've been seeing. And honestly, it really hasn't even found a floor any week, so to speak. We've always seen a slight decrease at a minimum, if not some of these larger decreases. So, there's no doubt in my mind this will continue to drop as well. So if you're shipping on this lane and, let's say for some reason you are, obviously the pandemic changed how people shipped, and, if they wanted to, order a few containers at once, or if they wanted to wait and see if they could, last through a high period. If you are waiting, if you're in that period of waiting, it will continue to go down. And I'm quite certain of that. And one of the main reasons why is those East Coast longshoreman contracts just started getting negotiated at the beginning of this year. And so that volume shift we saw away from the West Coast into the East Coast, we're likely going to see another shift, especially as we start to see news of the West Coast longshoremen making progress and the East Coast longshoremen just starting this really big journey. So keep that in mind. Anything you want to add? I've got a couple things I want to talk about, but nothing too major. Well,
no, Jay, please go.
All major, just not in some of the depth I'd like to. So, okay, so a month back, we mentioned the German Transport union, EVG, and they effectively shut down Germany's rail network. And right now, they're going to do it again. And the reason that they're citing is they're not seeing enough progress on their wage dispute with the rail operator Deutsche Bahn. So, in their words, they literally, their negotiator literally went to news outlets and said, "We will paralyze the country's rail network for weeks if we don't see, meaningful progress on our wages, on the wages we are asking for, or the wage negotiations." And that's pretty scary to hear. And the reason why is EVG represents around 230,000 workers for Deutsche Bahn Rail and bus companies, and they're demanding a 12% raise in their wages. And it's you have to remember that the U.S. and Europe are extremely different. The EU has a much more they rely on their rail network substantially more than we do. It's a little bit more flexible just because of the way it's set up with the multiple countries and such. Um, and they actually have had initiatives that we could get into more depth with to encourage the use of rail even more than it is today. Actually, there was some of their climate initiatives have been trying to push freight into the rail network. Now, they haven't been having success, but there's a lot of reasons behind that. Obviously, these pushes happened during the pandemic when flexibility was key, and being in a truck versus being on rail, if you could get a truck, obviously can give you flexibility. So, there was some short-term needs that obviously got put ahead of some long-term goals, but I still expect them to be continuing to push this. So having a union representing 230,000 individuals who operate the rail and bus networks throughout Germany threaten a strike for multiple weeks is definitely something you need to keep your eye on. Now, there is, and this is in actually the good news section of the talk on and this is another union. So another German-based union. It's actually a little bit beyond Germany. It's the United Services Union. They're known as Verdi. They've been striking over the past month as well, but they actually came to a tentative agreement just on this Saturday. They're a huge union. They represent in the millions of members. And this is really good news. It could signify that there could be some progress made for the EVG group. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
And they're heavily involved in air freight, that union down at the airports, as Jason knows. And, had they went on strike permanently, it would have affected over 380,000 air passengers, over 1,200 flights a day. So it's crazy. And like Jay said, I mean, they're negotiating, on behalf of about 2.5 million employees in the public sector.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, that's a ton. It's so many. And another thing we have to talk about is we've had a few shows where we've mentioned some of the union negotiations that have been going on, but a lot of these, the timing has really struck during a very difficult period. It's probably, if we really think holistically, it's probably a good thing when inflation was striking also to have a way for the unions to contract negotiate, but it also makes it tough, right? Because the situation where union members are seeing prices go up, but the other side of the equation isn't seeing profits up yet, right? So it's a very challenging moment to kind of renegotiate. But yeah, let's continue on. So onto our China to Europe lane, and this is a major lane. We've loved talking about this lane over the past couple of years. And it's really a go-to barometer. It's been, at least in the past, a go-to barometer of global shipping. But it's since December, actually since a little bit prior to December, it went from Old Faithful to this absolute roller coaster. And since then, we're seeing it just not act in that way of being a global barometer that it used to. And this really has its roots in China and the Ukraine war and the alignment with Russia. And this is just because, supplier bases are changing. And, with that, your consistency of volume in certain lanes is also changing as well. We're seeing this obviously in the Trans-Pacific, but that has, again, a multitude of variables. But we're definitely seeing this in the China to Europe lane through the Suez. And, one of the things you have to remember is that what's cool about this lane is it's not going over this vast swath of Pacific Ocean. There are a ton of stops on this lane. And those in between ports get the benefit of this lane being a powerful shipping lane because they enjoy pretty great regional shipping rates. Now, what has happened lately has been really a geopolitical thing. And this equation of the regional shippers getting this great deal off of this massive lane, it's kind of flipped. So right now, our China, Southeast Asia to Europe trade lane, it's been stagnant. Basically, it's been sitting at roughly 1400 since the middle of March. And it's deviated, slightly, but by most around $100. And this is, remember, 1400, just the ocean shipping portion. This was our averages as of last week. And, but if we go just back multiple months, it's really the deviation has been very, very slight up and down. Now, if we flip this equation and we look at shipments that have been leaving the Southeast Asia, China region and just going over to as far as the Middle East, you see a very different equation. You see rates at around 2,600 a TEU. And generally speaking, this was a stop on the way, but now it's the full destination. It's very, very interesting. And, this lane has also obviously seen a lack of demand. We've been dealing with this situation globally, so everyone's feeling the effects. But it being buoyed above the Europe trade lane is particularly interesting. And we're going to have to watch this week over week. We'll see if I can. Generally speaking, our volume in those lanes is, we have a small amount of volume in those lanes. So we have to go out to partners who are big shippers in those lanes and really talk to them. But when we can, we'll bring you some news on that. Now, Anthony, you want to add anything?
No, please go on.
So let's just dive in. Air market. Let's go. Southeast Asia, China to the US. So, I think you need to kind of frame this idea because we're entering kind of a new era here in 2023. And it's really, quite frankly, the end of the pandemic influenced supply chain bits. Not to say all of this isn't influenced by the pandemic, because it still is, but it's a different stage. So if you forget the rate market prior to the pandemic and you just think about since the pandemic, and I can give you a date, think about December 2021. So going into 2022. And you look until now and how rate averages have been looking over that time period. You see a clear plummet in air freight cost. And I mean, quite frankly, a plummet. Now, we've talked about the seesaw effect we see out of China, and that still is extremely true. So right now, what we're seeing as of last week is around $520 a kilo. But, work with us, work with your logistics provider, find the best time to do an air freight if you need to air freight. Obviously, if it's a hot item and you don't have a lot of time, you just need it, you don't have as much flexibility, and your logistics provider also can't give you the best options. But if you have some flexibility in when that thing ships, or if you let your logistics provider know when you made that order and when it's going to be ready, your cargo ready date, we really can work with the market and find the best time to ship. But as I mentioned last week, our rate averages, they were around 520. We'll likely be able to get lower than that. I definitely think over the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to get lower than that as well.
Right. And just real quick, Jay, on that. So, we do have a lot of technology and supply chain solutions. So we're able to go out there and get you an average and what the consensus is in the market right now. But when we do go to book, of course, we're dealing directly with our air freight or our ocean freight contracts or our trucking contracts. So our rates are going to be different. But as Jason mentioned, on the air side for Asia, the market really is stabilizing. And, the rates are going to remain higher than in Q1 while the demand has recovered and remains relatively stable. I think some of the freighter capacity is being retired from what I've heard on the Trans-Pacific trade lane specifically. And there's been a lot of increases in passenger capacity because it's summertime approaching, people are traveling more. So this should keep the overall capacity with the freighter plus the passenger airlines. And keep in mind, in some of those passenger airlines, there's belly cargo that can be loaded in those combi aircraft. So that also has remained relatively stable. And we really maintain a healthy supply and demand balance right now. So, who knows though? I mean, if we have a geopolitical situation out in the South China Seas that blows up, it's a whole different ball game. But Jason, I just wanted to add that.
No, and that's fantastic. That's some really good points. we, generally, if you look at the year kind of like cyclically, you've got in the beginning of the year, you've got your slow period, and now we're out of that period. And, a lot of consumer electronic products start to be launched as people leave that, the holiday spending and then the post spending winter. And then now we kind of get to the point where people start spending money again. And a lot of consumer electronics that are manufactured over in Southeast Asia, China, that region, they suck up freighter capacity. So, we'll see a level of demand come back that will stabilize freight markets when it comes to air. And it's going to be very fascinating to see where the new norm is in air. And this will be a telling year because we haven't really had a year where we can, we haven't had COVID related issues due to, in the air markets. Oh my gosh, we had the largest air carrier out of Southeast Asia, China, shut down for like 3 weeks last year.
Yeah.
just right prior to Chinese New Year. Not a great time.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be seeing that. At least we're not expecting to see that over the course of the next 12 months. So it's going to be interesting to see how things find their new norm. And it's going to be very telling for just the cost of goods going forward as we see new norms compared to prior to the pandemic. Really, really interested to see how the data kind of falls into place on this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And okay, European air shipments. So we got to talk about our partner, LLS. We are deeply integrated with our German partner, LLS. We have designed based off they invented, we plugged into it, and we created these really cool air and ocean consolidation programs. And it's designed to be regular, it's designed to be reliable, and it's designed to have the least amount of eyes and hands and everything on it. So when, God forbid something goes wrong during an air consol, let's say a product gets punctured, we've got so few people involved, we can identify what happened, where it happened, walk you through a claim process, get that thing sorted out if that occurs. But the best part about it is these LLS guys, they pack the shipments in a specific way to ensure the least amount of damage, ensure the least amount of shifting, and also they've got a regular schedule to make sure this stuff is out the door on the plane, ready to go. We love them. And, they specifically only use freighters. We've worked with them and we've talked why, and it's just, there's a multitude of reasons, but that comes to our warehouses. We unpack and we ship it back to you. And we've got a really fantastic program going on. So
and just one thing to add on that, as Jason was talking about, I mean, we have such a high level of enhanced personal customer service. We really give them that human touch, that hand holding, and the proactive communication with the updates and faster communication, faster turnaround time. And then, when we add into the mix our new client portal powered by Project 44, it's really a game changer on these air and ocean consoles, Jay, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Amazing.
imagine not having to pick up the phone, not having to send an email, having all the updates getting pushed to you, having real-time access to everything that's occurring and all of the documentation right there. So it's all in one place. It's not out in, oblivion. It's cool. We're really excited. We've got a couple beta testers right now that are plugged in and I mean, we can't wait to have them share with you their experience because it's been really fun for us to watch.
What else you got for us today, Jay?
I got a little bit more. We are just over time though. So let's quick talk about if you're not shipping consol, let's say, you just ship occasionally, let's say you ship a lot. And so consol doesn't make sense for you. Right now we are seeing the rates a little bit higher than we have generally out of Europe to the US. It's right around $3 a kilo. And, but still, when you think about the global air freight economy, it is quite a good rate. And, that's bringing you right back to consolidation because we buy that space. You could expect our rate to be fantastic as well. Now, let's move it on. Right now, I don't have any data this week. It's totally my fault. I do not have the data compiled for our Central and South American shipments, air freight. I am so sorry, but tune back in. We'll give you the news. We'll update you on this rate as I gather that for you and provide it for you in the coming weeks. But let's quick segue over to our final topic of the day, the oil and gas market. And I want to say, it is almost time to start to celebrate because we are sitting here at a diesel cost per gallon on a national level at right at the bottom of the $4 range. We're at $4.01 at an average across the country. And that's awesome. We've been going down each week. When it breaks nationally as an average into the $3 range, we all need to celebrate. But right now, our biggest loser, which generally speaking it's just the case, California, the regulation does make petroleum products more expensive, at the pump. So $4.90 per gallon right now in California on average. Our biggest winner, which is nearly always the same, which is the petroleum producing region, PAD 3, petroleum not producing, but producing and actually modifying. PAD 3, it's the Gulf Coast states, not including Florida. They came in at $3.74 a gallon, which is great news. A lot of carriers have actually been dropping their fuel surcharges, including XPO, but with the notable exception of UPS, who raised their fuel surcharge. So keep that in mind. But as a reminder, we went over this in a previous show. Fuel surcharges are not only fuel costs. They include a lot of different things, and you can't apples to apples compare one company's to another. So it's important to understand that's just not the cost of fuel in there, and negotiating on that line item can be really challenging. That being said, we'd love to negotiate for you. So give us a call if you want some help with that, and we can dive in. That's what I got for today. Anthony, you got anything you want to slip in, even though we're over time?
No, I know Vanessa's probably letting us know it's overtime, but no, we're good. I think was a great show today. Very informative as usual. Looking forward to next week's show. And as always, make it a great day. Is that a good? Or what does it say? Make it a great week, right?
I can't believe I can't remember this because we've said it for 2 years now. You've said it for 2 years, but make it a great day.
And a great week, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Remember, at SCS, we move the world to you. Take care.
I love that.